The wind off the harbor smelled of salt and rope tar and the sharp iron tang of fish blood on wet stone. Petra Ashcombe pulled her shawl tighter against the November chill and counted the coins in her palm one more time. 18 shillings and fourpence. Every penny she had saved for 2 years of mending shirts by candlelight and taking in linen from the vicar's wife. She had meant it for a winter coat. She had meant it for boots that did not let the wet through. She had meant it for 100 small things a woman of 22 might mean money for. She was going to give it away instead. The old fisherman sat on an overturned crate outside the harbor master's office, and his hands were shaking. Not from cold, though the cold was real enough. His hands were shaking because a large man in a dark coat stood over him with a ledger, and the large man was speaking in a low, flat voice that carried across the wet cobbles like the toll of a small bell. £6, 4 shillings. Master Nye. That is the sum owed on the mooring for the year past and the year before. The harbour will not carry a debt into a third year. Those are the standing rules. I did not make them. I only keep them. The old fisherman opened his mouth and closed it again. His lower lip trembled. He was 70 if he was a day, and his coat had been patched so many times the patches themselves had patches. His boat, the Mary Wren, bobbed at her tether behind him with her paint peeling and her nets folded neat as a churchgoer's Sunday collar. She was all he had. Everyone in the village of Selwick knew it. His wife had been buried 3 summers back. His son had gone to the merchant navy and had not come home. The Mary Wren was his church and his hearth and his reason to rise before the gulls. Petra had stopped walking 20 paces off when she saw the scene. She had been on her way to the market with a basket of mended linen for Mrs. Halloway. She had a delivery to make. She had rent due at the end of the week. She had every good practical reason in the world to keep walking, put her head down, and mind her own business the way a woman in her position was expected to mind it. She kept walking, but not past. Toward, her boots made a small clean sound on the wet stones. The tall man with the ledger looked up. He had a face like a good clock, orderly, well-made, entirely without feeling. He was not the villain of the piece. He was only the man doing the villain's counting. Petra understood the difference and did not blame him for it. "Sir," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How much did you say the sum was?" The man with the ledger frowned. He looked at her once, top to bottom, plain wool gown, plain wool shawl, plain brown hair pinned plain under a plain bonnet, and clearly decided she was of no consequence. "This is not your affair, miss. How much?" Something in her tone made him answer. £6, 4 shillings. Petra swallowed. £6 and 4 shillings was more than 18 shillings and fourpence. £6 and 4 shillings was more than she had ever held in her hand at one time in her life. She looked down at the coins in her palm and felt the small foolish weight of them, and she looked at old Master Nye and saw that he was looking at her too now, and his mouth was still open, and his eyes were wet. She thought, very calmly, "I cannot save all of it. But I can put a foot in the door." "I have 18 shillings and fourpence, she said. "I would like to pay it against his account." "Please," the man with the ledger blinked. "Miss, that leaves £5, 6 shillings and 8 pence still owing. Payment in part does not release the debt." "I understand that. The vessel will still be seized at nightfall if the balance is not met." "I understand that too." "Take the 18 shillings against it anyway." Master Nay made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound an old man makes when a thing hits him he has not been braced for. Petra did not look at him. She was afraid if she looked at him, she would cry, and crying would only make the man with the ledger feel he had done his duty in some hard but virtuous way, and she did not want to give him that comfort. She held out the coins. The man with the ledger looked at her hand and looked at his book, and after a very long moment he took the coins and wrote the figure down in a neat small hand. He tore off a slip of paper and gave it to her. For his records, he said. Not yours. For his, she agreed, and pressed the slip into Master Nye's shaking hand and closed his fingers around it. Then she turned and walked away before her face could do anything she would be ashamed of later. She did not see the man standing under the eaves of the sailmaker's shop across the yard. He had come out for a breath of air between one meeting and another and had stopped at the sight of the ledger man doing his work. He had watched the whole exchange without moving. His name was Alistair Renmore, and he owned every stone of the harbour of Selwick, and every mooring, and every warehouse along the tide line, and the man with the ledger was in his employ. He had come down from the great house that morning to inspect the winter accounts. He had not expected to see a plain woman in a plain shawl walk into his ledger clerk's business and try to buy back a fisherman's boat with the pocket money of a mending girl. He watched her go. He did not follow. Not yet. He watched the way her back stayed straight until she turned the corner. And only then did he see her shoulders drop the smallest inch, as though she had been holding the breath in against a weight and could finally let some of it out. "Peverell," he said quietly. The ledger man looked up. "Your Grace." That woman. Who was she? Peverell consulted a small mental file. He was very good at his mental files. A Miss Ashcombe, I believe. Her father was Dr. Ashcombe. He died some years past. She takes in mending. Lives with an aunt in Wetherby Lane. And Master Nye owes £5, 6 and 8. Balance due by dark, or the Merry Wren goes to auction Friday. Alistair Renmore looked at the peeling paint of the little fishing boat, and the old man sitting on the crate wiping his eyes with the back of a knotted hand, and the small slip of paper crushed against his palm. "Pay it," he said. Peverell blinked. "Your Grace?" "The balance." "Pay it. Out of my personal account, not the harbour's. And do not put my name on the receipt." "Put no name on it. Tell him the debt was settled by an anonymous benefactor." "Your Grace, the standing rule was made by me, Peverell. I can suspend it for one boat and one old man on a Wednesday in November if I choose to." "Do it." "Yes, Your Grace." The Duke did not look at his clerk. He was looking at the corner around which the woman had gone. He was thinking about the exact expression on her face when she had held out those coins. It had not been pity, which was cheap and common. It had not been performance, because there had been no audience she had been aware of. It had been something else, something closer to the plain fact of a thing being wrong and her being unwilling to walk past the wrong without at least putting her hand against it. He had seen a great many faces in his life. Ambitious ones, frightened ones, hungry ones, rehearsed ones. He had not, in a long time, seen a face that had simply decided to try. He stood a moment longer in the shadow of the sailmaker's eaves. The wind off the harbour lifted the hem of his coat and dropped it. The gulls above the tide line called and called. Somewhere a rope creaked against a bollard. He turned and walked back toward the harbour master's office, and he did not tell anyone what he was thinking, because he was not entirely certain yet what he was thinking. He only knew that on Friday the Merry Wren would still be tied at her mooring, and that on some other day, not immediately, he intended to walk down Wetherby Lane. Petra reached the bottom of Wetherby Lane before her hands began to shake. She stopped and put a palm against the cold stone wall of the smithy, and let her forehead touch the back of her own knuckles. The stone bit through her glove. Her breath came out in a small white cloud and hung there for a moment before the wind took it. 18 shillings and 4pence. 2 years of pricked fingers and squinting at candle wicks and mending shirts so fine she could not have afforded the thread if the vicar's wife had not given it. Gone. And it had not been enough. It had been a stone thrown into a river. The river went on. She straightened. She smoothed her shawl. She walked the rest of the way to her aunt's cottage with her chin up, because there was no other way to walk when you had done something that could not be undone. Her Aunt Della was at the fire with a pan of onions. The kitchen smelled of onions and beeswax from the polished table and, faintly, of peat smoke drifting down the chimney the wrong way when the wind shifted. Aunt Della did not turn round. "You are late, child. The pie is in, and the crust will not wait on you." "I know. I am sorry. Take off your bonnet before you sit." Petra took off her bonnet. She sat. She put her empty basket on the floor beside her. She had not delivered the linen, she realized. She had walked right past Mrs. Halloway's without seeing it. She would have to go back before dark. But not yet. Not yet. Aunt Della turned round at last, wooden spoon in her hand, and stopped. Aunt Della had been a lady's maid in her younger years and had lost none of her lady's maid's eye. She looked at Petra's face for the space of 2 long breaths. "What did you do?" "Nothing. Petra Marion Ashcombe." "What did you do?" Petra told her. She told it plainly and without embroidery, because there was no embroidering the fact of 18 shillings and 4pence handed to a stranger who was not even the debtor. Aunt Della listened without interrupting. When Petra was finished, Aunt Della put the spoon down on the hearth, sat down opposite her at the little scrub table, and pressed her lips together for a long moment. "The winter coat," Aunt Della said finally. "I know. The boots. I know. Your mother's ring is still at Sowerby's, and if you did not redeem it by Christmas, he will sell it. I know that too." Aunt Della looked at her a while longer. Then she did a thing Petra did not expect. She reached across the table and put her palm against her niece's cheek, and her hand was warm from the fire and smelled of onion, and she said, "You did right by him, child. You did wrong by yourself. Both are true. Do not pretend one is not." Petra did not cry. She had done all her not crying already. On the walk home, she only closed her eyes and pressed her cheek a little harder against her aunt's palm and let the moment stretch. The fire popped in the grate. The onions hissed. Outside somewhere a gull screamed and was answered by another. The moment stretched. Neither woman moved. Petra could feel the ridges of her aunt's knuckles and the small tremor that lived in Aunt Della's hand these days from long years of scrubbing. And she could feel the heat of the fire on the side of her face, and she could feel the raw place in her chest where the 18 shillings had been and was not anymore. Then Aunt Della patted her cheek twice, briskly, in the way of a woman who did not permit tenderness to last longer than was strictly necessary, and got up and went back to her onions. "There is bread and a little cheese," she said over her shoulder. "Eat before you go back out. And Petra, do not tell Mrs. Halloway, she will pity you, and pity is bad for the digestion." "Yes, Aunt, that was the whole of it. That was Wednesday. Thursday, Master Nye came to the door. He came at dusk, hat in his hands, and the hat had been brushed so hard the nap had gone bald in one place. He would not come in. He stood on the step with the wind pulling at what little hair he had and his eyes very bright. "Miss Ashcombe, Master Nye, please come in out of the wind." "No, miss, no. I will not sit in your aunt's chair with these boots. I only come to say a thing, only a thing." Petra waited. "The merry wren is mine still," he said. "The whole of it. The full debt is paid." Petra stared. The whole of it?" "Aye, miss, paid clean. Peverell came to me not 2 hours after you went off. Said the balance was settled. Said the settler did not want his name given. Said it was done and there was no more to say. But I know, miss, I know it was you. Master Nye, it was not me. I had 18 shillings. Nothing more. Then it was you who started it. And whoever finished it, they finished what you started. And I will pray for you every night I have left in this world, and for whichever soul finished it too. And God is not particular about which of them he hears first." Petra opened her mouth. She closed it. She did not know what to say. Master Nye looked at her a while longer, and his old mouth worked, and then he bowed to her. Actually bowed, an old-fashioned bow with the flat of his hand against his chest, and turned and walked away into the dusk, and the wind ate the sound of his boots on the stones inside of 10 paces. Petra shut the door. She leaned her back against it. Aunt Della was watching her from the hearth. "Well," Aunt Della said, "someone paid the rest. So I gathered." "Aunt, who does that? Who pays £5 and 6 shillings for an old man he has never met?" Aunt Della picked up her mending and did not look up. "I could name 3 people in this village who could afford to. I could name none who would, which leaves us with someone who could and would, and that is a very small number of people, and only one of them owns the harbor." Petra did not understand for a moment. Then she did. "The Duke. So I would guess. But the Duke does not know Master Nye. The Duke does not know me. The Duke does not do—" "The Duke," said Aunt Della, still not looking up, "does what he pleases. That is what dukes are for. Now go to bed, child. You have been strange all day, and you will be worse tomorrow if you do not sleep." Petra went to bed. She did not sleep. She lay in the small cold room under the eaves and listened to the wind off the harbor and thought about a man she had never spoken to, paying a debt to a stranger, for no reason she could name. And beneath that thought, sitting quiet and steady like a stone at the bottom of a well, was another thought she did not want to look at directly. That the anonymous settler had known where to find Master Nye. That the anonymous settler had known the sum to the exact shilling. That the anonymous settler had known, evidently, that a Miss Ashcombe of Wetherby Lane had walked up with 18 shillings and 4pence, or he would not have known to finish what she had started. Someone had been watching. Someone had been watching very carefully, and she had not known it. On Friday morning, she took her basket of mending down to Mrs. Halloway's at last and made her apologies for the delay and did not tell her about the 18 shillings. Mrs. Halloway gave her 3 more shirts and a shilling for the trouble. Petra put the shilling in her apron pocket and went home the long way, past the harbor. The Merry Wren was still at her mooring. Master Nay was aboard her, coiling a rope, and he did not see Petra pass. And she did not stop. She walked up along the quay, past the warehouses. The warehouses had all been repainted last summer. She remembered noticing at the time that they were suddenly all the same shade of dark green, as though a single hand had ordered it done. The harbor itself was busy on Friday. Fishing smacks were putting in with the tide. A trader from Whitby was unloading barrels of something that smelled of tar and vinegar. The air was full of gulls and shouted orders and the smell of salt and old fish. She had grown up with it. She could not imagine air without it. She turned inland to go home, and at the corner where the quay met the market road, she nearly walked into a tall man in a dark coat. She stepped back and looked up. He was not classically handsome. She noticed that first, because she had been braced by the tallness and the well-cut coat for something showier. His face was long and even, and his eyes were a hard, clear grey, and his hair had a little iron at the temples, though he could not have been 40. He looked like a man who was used to being looked at, and had stopped noticing. He touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Ashcombe." Petra's stomach turned over once, coldly and settled. "You have the better of me, Sir Alastair Renmore," he said. He said it the way another man might have said, just Alastair, or Renmore, if you like. He did not add Duke of Selwick because he did not need to. Everyone in the county knew who the Duke of Selwick was. Almost no one had spoken to him. Petra dipped her head an inch. Not a curtsy. She was not in his drawing room. "Your Grace, I am glad to have met you at last. I had thought to walk up Wetherby Lane this week, but the weather has been against it." "The weather has been fine, Your Grace." He looked at her. There was something like a small, contained flicker at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "So it has been," he said. "So it has." Petra waited. She was aware of 2 things at once, that her boots were letting in wet on the left side, and that a man she had never met was standing in the middle of Selwick Harbour Road as though he had every hour of the day to spare for her, when everyone in 3 counties knew he did not. "You wish to speak with me, Your Grace?" "I did. I do." "Then perhaps you will." That did make him smile. Not much, but a real change in his face, the way a rope loosens by a single turn. "You do not warm quickly, Miss Ashcombe. I have not been given reason to, Your Grace, and I have delivery still to make and a stew on the hob. Then I shall be brief. My clerk, on Wednesday last, took 18 shillings and 4 pence from you against the account of one Master Nye. I have come to return it to you." He reached into an inner pocket of his coat. Petra held up her hand. "Do not, Your Grace." He paused, coins in his palm, and looked at her over them. "Miss Ashcombe, that sum represents— I know what it represents. I gave it. It is not mine any more. Give it to your poor box if you have one. Give it to the Sailors' Widows' Fund. Give it to Master Nye against next year's mooring. Do not give it back to me. May I ask why? Because taking it back would mean I had not meant to give it in the first place." She had not planned the sentence. It came out of her mouth in the plain shape of what she thought, and once it was out, she could not have taken it back if she had wanted to. She did not want to. The Duke of Selwick looked at her for a long moment. It was one of those moments Aunt Della would have called a slow moment, though Aunt Della did not use the phrase. Time stretched. The gulls above the tide line called and were far away. The wet in her boot was very cold. She could smell the tar on the ropes of a coal boat unloading 2 moorings down and under it. The small, clean smell of wood smoke on his coat, and further under that, something she could not have named. The smell of a house very old and very well kept. The smell of wax polish and old paper and a fire that had been burning in the same grate for 150 years. He closed his hands slowly over the coins and put them back in his coat. "Very well," he said. "I take the correction. I did not correct you, Your Grace. You did. Politely, I am familiar with the sensation. Good afternoon, Miss Ashcombe." He touched the brim of his hat again and walked past her toward the harbour master's office, and Petra stood where she was for the count of 10 breaths before she remembered she had somewhere to be. She did not think of him for the rest of the day. That was a lie. She thought of him almost the whole of the rest of the day, and she was cross with herself for it, and cross with him too for existing in a shape that stuck in the mind. He came to the cottage on Tuesday. Not to the door. He did not knock. He had the sense not to. He simply happened to be standing outside the smithy at the bottom of the lane at the hour Petra was known to walk down for water from the pump. And he touched his hat and asked if he might walk with her. And she said, "It is a public street, Your Grace," which was neither yes nor no. And he took it for yes and walked. They talked of nothing at first. The weather. The price of coal. Whether the fare at Wetherby had been better this year or worse. He was easier to talk to than she had expected. He asked questions, and then he was quiet while she answered, and he did not interrupt to be clever, which she found unexpectedly restful. Halfway down the lane he said, without changing his tone, "My clerk tells me your mother's ring is at Sobeys." Petra stopped walking. The bucket was heavy in her hand. She set it down on the stone curb very carefully. "Your Grace, I did not send him to find that out. He found it out on his own. He has a great fondness for finding things out. I am telling you because I would rather you hear it from me than from him. Are you also telling me because you intend to redeem the ring? I had considered it. Do not." He nodded once. Slowly, "I take the correction. Twice, Your Grace, in 6 days. You will find the habit expensive. I find it educational." She looked at him. He looked back. Something in his face was serious and not amused. She picked up the bucket again. "Your Grace, why are you here?" "Walking you to the pump." "Why?" He did not answer for a moment. They had reached the pump. There was no one else at it, which was unusual for that hour, and Petra suspected without proof that this was because he had, in some quiet way she would probably never uncover, arranged for it to be so. She set the bucket under the spout and worked the handle. Water rang against tin. "I have known a great many people in my life, Miss Ashcombe," he said finally. "Very few of them have surprised me. On Wednesday last I saw a woman give away money she plainly could not spare to a man she was not related to and did not appear to know very well, in the belief that it would help even a little, and knowing perfectly well it would not be enough. I have been thinking about it since. I would like to know what sort of person does that. That is all. I am not here to court you. I am not here to redeem your ring. I am here because I have a question, and you appear to be the only person alive who can answer it." Petra worked the pump handle 2 more times. The bucket was full. She let the handle down carefully so it did not clang. "Then the answer is going to disappoint you, Your Grace. There is no sort of person. There was only a Wednesday, and an old man, and 18 shillings, and me. Any of them being different, none of it would have happened. I am not a saint. I am tired, and I am cross, and my boot lets in water, and I want my mother's ring back, and I cannot have it, and none of that stopped me on Wednesday because Wednesday was not about me. That is the whole answer." He listened. He did not speak until she was finished. Then he said, "Thank you, Miss Ashcombe. Your Grace, may I carry the bucket?" "No, Your Grace. If you carried the bucket up Weatherby Lane, half the village would see it, and by supper the other half would have heard about it, and by tomorrow morning I should be engaged to you in the general estimation, and I do not wish to be engaged to you. And I do not think you wish to be engaged to me, and therefore we shall both carry our own things this afternoon." He laughed. It was a small sound, and it seemed to surprise him. "Good afternoon, Miss Ashcombe. Good afternoon, Your Grace." She carried her own bucket up Weatherby Lane. She did not look back to see whether he watched her go. She suspected that he did. On Thursday she saw him again. Not by design. She had gone down to the physic garden behind the vicarage. The vicar's wife let her pick sage and rosemary in exchange for the mending, and he was there, of all places, standing in a peacoat and no hat, looking down at a bed of winter kale with the mildly puzzled expression of a man who had never in his life stood so close to a growing vegetable. Petra could not help herself. She laughed. He looked up. He did not look offended. He looked, for a fraction of a second, embarrassed, which she had not thought his face capable of. "Miss Ashcombe, Your Grace, do you require assistance? I am told this is kale. You are told correctly. I have been served kale on many occasions, and I confess I did not know until this moment that it grew out of the ground. I had assumed it arrived in a tureen. Most things arrive in tureens if one is a duke, Your Grace. It is one of the disadvantages. I begin to see." She cut her sage. She cut her rosemary. He did not offer to help, which she appreciated. He walked a step behind her along the paths as she moved from bed to bed and asked her the names of things, and when she gave them, he repeated them back once, quietly, as though committing them to memory. Feverfew, yarrow, angelica, bitter melissa. Rue for grief and rosemary for remembrance and thyme for courage, though the vicar's wife did not hold with the old wives' meanings and grew them only for the kitchen. At the gate he said, "May I ask a personal question, Miss Ashcombe?" "You may ask." "Your father." "He was a physician. He is dead these 6 years. He kept this garden before Mrs. Redgrave did. He taught me every plant in it. That is why I am comfortable in it, if that is your question." It was, in part. And the rest of it. How he died. She was quiet a long moment. The physic garden smelled of wet earth and bruised sage on her fingers and the faint dry smell of the boxwood hedges in winter. And above it all the salt from the harbour which was in every breath one drew in Selwick. He caught a fever from a patient he would not stop attending. The patient was a laundress. She could not pay him. He went anyway. He caught what she had. She lived. He did not. That is the whole story, Your Grace. It is not an interesting one. It is the second time you have told me a story with the same shape. Your Grace, a person cannot pay. Someone helps anyway. Someone pays a cost. You are the daughter of the story you told me at the pump. She had not thought of it in that way. She stood at the gate of the physic garden with her bundle of herbs in her arms and let the thought settle on her. It settled uncomfortably, the way an accurate thought does. She did not answer him. She did not need to. He had not asked a question. Good afternoon, Miss Ashcombe. Good afternoon, Your Grace. She was 3 streets away before she realized she was smiling. She stopped smiling at once. Then, when no one was looking, she started smiling again. The trouble began the following Monday. His name was Roderick Kilbrass, and he was the son of a baronet from over the Wetherby side, and he had been trying for 2 years to make himself agreeable to the Duke of Selwick, because his father wished a good marriage for his sister and had determined, without asking either the Duke or the sister, that a Duke of Selwick would do very well. Roderick Kilbrace had heard of the Duke's recent unusual habit of walking about Selwick village at odd hours, and being seen at the physic garden, and being seen at the harbour road, and Roderick Kilbrace had made inquiries. Roderick Kilbrace found Petra at the market on Monday morning. She was buying a pound of soft cheese from the dairywoman's stall. She had her basket over her arm and her shawl pinned neatly at the throat. She did not know Roderick Kilbrace by sight. When he stepped in front of her, she took him at first for another customer waiting his turn, and she smiled politely and stepped aside. He stepped with her. Miss Ashcombe. Sir? I do not believe we have met. We have not. Kilbrace. Roderick Kilbrace. Perhaps you have heard the name. I have not. He smiled. His smile did not reach his eyes. He had a fine, narrow face and very white teeth, and the kind of hair that had been arranged to look as though it had not been arranged. I wonder whether I might have a word. I am buying cheese, sir, after the cheese. Petra did not wish to have a word with Roderick Kilbrace after the cheese. She did not wish to have a word with Roderick Kilbrace ever. But the dairywoman was watching, and half the market was drifting in that unhurried way a market drifts when it senses a small drama in the making, and Petra was not a woman who made a scene at a stall if she could help it. She finished her transaction, took her cheese, and walked to the edge of the market square, where there was a low wall she could set her basket on and, if necessary, retreat behind. Sir, I understand you have been much in the company of the Duke of Selwick. You understand incorrectly. Twice on the harbour road. Once at the pump on Wetherby Lane. Once in the physic garden. Once at the smithy corner. Petra kept her face still. Someone had been counting. Someone had been counting for him. You have counted very carefully, sir. I have kept my ears open. Miss Ashcombe, let us be direct with one another. You are not a lady. Forgive me, I mean no unkindness. You are a respectable young woman. You are the daughter of a country physician. You take in mending. You are not a suitable object for the attention of a peer of the realm, and I am telling you this as a courtesy, so that you understand where the lines lie before you cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. Petra's hand tightened on the handle of her basket. She did not answer. The Duke, said Roderick Kilbrace, in a lower voice, meant for her ear alone, but pitched just high enough for the woman selling apples 8 feet away to catch every word, has been amusing himself. Men of his rank do. It is a phase. It passes. If you are wise, you will not attempt to prolong it. A woman like you clinging to the hem of a duke's coat is a very old story, and it does not end well for the woman. It ends with her name being a joke in 3 counties, and no honest man willing to marry her afterward, and no honest work willing to take her on, and a great deal of quiet weeping in a rented room. I should hate to see that be your ending. Truly I should. He smiled at her. It was still the same smile. So take the advice of a friend, Miss Ashcombe. Go home. Stay home. Mend your shirts. And do not answer the door when he next comes calling. You will thank me in a year. The market had gone quiet in a ring of about 10 feet around them. The apple seller had stopped pretending to arrange her apples. The dairywoman had come round from behind her stall. 2 boys with a barrow had stopped to watch. Somewhere, a woman with a baby laughed nervously and hushed it. Petra looked at Roderick Kilbrace. She did not move. She did not raise her voice. She was aware distantly that her heart was beating in her ears, but her hands on the basket handle were steady, and her voice, when it came out, was steady too. Sir, thank you for the courtesy of your advice. I shall answer it with a courtesy of my own. My father, whose name was Ashcombe, spent his life attending patients who could not pay him, and one of them killed him, and he did not consider it a wasted life. My mother, whose ring is at Sowerby's, taught me that a woman's dignity does not sit in her purse and cannot be taken from her by a man in a well-cut coat at a market stall. And the Duke of Selwick, whom I have met 4 times, and to whom I owe nothing, has never in my company said or done one thing that would give a friend of his cause to warn me off him. Which means, either you are not his friend, or I am not the woman you think I am. In either case, sir, our conversation is finished. Good morning. She curtsied. Not deeply, exactly as much as courtesy required, and not 1 inch further. She picked up her basket. She turned. She walked out of the market with her back straight and her chin level, and she did not look at the apple seller or the dairywoman or the 2 boys with the barrow, and she did not run, and she did not slow. She did not know that Alastair Renmore had been standing in the doorway of the printer's shop on the north side of the square for the last 4 minutes. He had come into the village that morning to collect a book he had ordered. The printer's boy had been fetching it from the back when he had happened to look through the window and see the little knot of people gathered at the low wall by the market. He had recognized Petra Ashcombe's shawl at once. He had seen the young man in the too fine coat. He had heard, distinctly, the phrase clinging to the hem of a duke's coat, because Roderick Kilbrace had raised his voice enough that the whole square could hear. The Duke of Selwick had not moved from the doorway. He had listened to every word Roderick Kilbrace said. He had listened to every word Petra Ashcombe said in reply. He had watched her walk out of the market. He had waited until she was well out of sight. Then he had waited a little longer. Then he crossed the square. Roderick Kilbrace was still at the low wall, arranging his cuffs. He had been very pleased with himself. He had, he thought, done the thing efficiently. The girl would keep away from the Duke now. The Duke would notice she was keeping away. The novelty would pall. The Duke would go back to considering respectable matches, of which Roderick Kilbrace's sister was, of course, the most respectable available. Roderick Kilbrace had earned his sister a duchy in less than 5 minutes' work. He was already thinking about how to describe the scene to his father. He looked up and saw the Duke of Selwick standing 3 feet away. His face did an interesting thing. Several colors moved across it in a short space of time. Your Grace. Mr. Kilbrace, I did not see you in the village today, no. I trust you are well. I am. Mr. Kilbrace, I heard you speaking to a lady just now. A lady, your Grace, is perhaps? A lady, Mr. Kilbrace, Miss Ashcombe is a lady. I choose the word deliberately. Kindly do not interrupt me again. I heard you speaking to a lady just now, in a public marketplace, in the hearing of at least a dozen witnesses, and I want to be certain I understood you correctly. You told her, in substance, that my attentions to her were a passing amusement, that she was unsuitable to receive them, and that she would end her days weeping alone in a rented room if she did not take the hint and hide from me. Is that a fair summary? Roderick Kilbrace opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I take your silence for agreement. Now, Mr. Kilbrace, I have not, in point of fact, made a declaration to Miss Ashcombe, nor she to me. What passes between us is our own business, and until such time as either of us makes an announcement, it is not the business of any man in this county. Most especially not a man who considers himself my friend, which I do not, or my future brother-in-law, which he is not, or the guardian of my reputation, which I neither require nor asked for. Am I making myself understood? Your Grace, I asked whether I was making myself understood, Mr. Kilbrace. A yes will suffice. Yes, Your Grace. Good. Now, I heard also that you claim to speak on my behalf. You do not. You have never. You will not. If I hear that you have spoken to Miss Ashcombe again, or spoken of her again, in any tone less than the respect one owes to a woman one is not intimate with, I shall know of it within the hour. My steward hears everything in this county that touches my name. Within the hour, and within the day, Miss Kilbrace, I shall have called upon your father, and I shall have had a very quiet conversation with him about certain harbour tariffs from which his estate has benefited these last 4 years at rates I chose to keep low as a courtesy to a neighbour. Am I making myself understood? Yes, Your Grace. Good afternoon, Mr. Kilbrace. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The square had gone silent around them the way a room goes silent when a plate breaks. The apple seller was staring. The dairywoman had a hand pressed to her mouth. The 2 boys with the barrow had let it stop rolling. Somewhere further off a horse stamped, and its bridle jingled. The Duke of Selwick did not look at the crowd. He turned. He walked out of the square in the direction Petra had gone. He did not catch her at Wetherby Lane. He did not try to. He gave her the afternoon. He came in the evening. He knocked, this time. Aunt Della answered the door with her sleeves rolled up to the elbows and flour on her apron, and she looked at him without curtsying and without inviting him in, and she said, Your Grace. She is in the kitchen. You may sit in the parlour, and I will see whether she wishes to come out. Thank you, Mrs. Ashcombe. I am not Mrs. Ashcombe. I am Miss Ashcombe. Della Ashcombe. My brother was her father. Miss Ashcombe. My apologies. You may sit down. He sat in the parlour. It was a small, clean room with a peat fire smoking gently in the grate and a horsehair sofa that had seen better decades, and a framed piece of embroidered scripture over the mantel that read, in careful red thread, A soft answer turneth away wrath. Aunt Della had done the embroidery herself 30 years ago. She had not, in her own estimation, learned the lesson. But she liked the letters. Petra came in a few minutes later. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow like her aunt's, and her hands were wet, and she dried them on her apron before she sat opposite him, not on the sofa, but on the small wooden chair beside the fire. Your Grace. Miss Ashcombe, I owe you an apology. You do not. I do. In point of fact, I owe you several, and I do not intend to trouble you with all of them tonight, only the one that matters. I stood in the doorway of the printer's shop this morning and heard Mr. Kilbrace speaking to you, and I did not step forward. I let you answer him alone. I told myself it was because you did not require rescuing, which was true. I should have stepped forward all the same. That is the apology. I offer it plainly, and I will not offer it more than once. Petra looked at the fire. The peat crumbled softly and gave off a thick, sweet, earthen smell that seemed to fill the whole small room. She thought about the market square that morning and how her hands had not shaken until she was 3 streets away. Your Grace. Yes, you did the right thing not stepping forward. I did not. You did. If you had stepped forward, the story in the village tomorrow would be that the Duke of Selwick fought a young man in the market over a mending girl. Because you did not, the story in the village tomorrow will be that Petra Ashcombe told Roderick Kilbrace what she thought of him, and walked away. Those are very different stories, and only one of them belongs to me. I would like to keep the one that belongs to me. So thank you for not taking it from me." He was quiet. "I did," he said, after a while, cross the square afterwards. "I spoke to him. I made certain things clear." "I heard you did." "Word travels." "Word travels. Are you angry with me for that?" She thought about it. She was surprised that she had to think about it. She would have expected herself to be angry. She was not. "No, Your Grace. You did not fight my battle. You fought your own. He had used your name and your intentions to threaten me, and you were within your rights to correct him. That is not the same as rescuing me. I know the difference. I think you do too." He looked at her a long moment. In the poor light of the peat fire, his eyes were not gray anymore, but almost brown, and the small lines at the corners of them, which she had not noticed before, looked softer. "Miss Ashcombe." "Your Grace, may I say one thing more?" "You may. I did not begin this, whatever this has been, as a courtship. I began it because I had a question about a woman who gave away money she could not spare, and I wanted the answer to the question. I have my answer now. It is not a tidy answer. It is that the woman in question is exactly what she appeared to be from the first, only more so. And I have been walking about a village for a fortnight because the answer keeps deepening, and I do not, in fact, want it to stop deepening." Petra did not move. "I am not asking you anything tonight," he went on in the same steady voice. "I am not making a declaration. I have not earned one, and I know it. I am telling you what my question was and what my answer is, because I would rather you hear it from me than construct it out of what a man in a market square told you I was thinking. That is all. If you would prefer that I do not walk down Wetherby Lane again, you have only to say so, and I will not. Your aunt will be my witness. Say it now, and it is done." Aunt Della, in the kitchen, made a small sound of a woman pretending very hard not to be listening. Petra looked at the fire. The peat smoke rose in a thin, steady thread and disappeared up the chimney. Outside, the wind had dropped. The salt smell of the harbor had come in under the door with him. It clung to his coat. It clung to everything in Selwick. She thought about 150 things at once. She thought about her mother's ring at Sowerby's, and her father in his study with his book of remedies open, and the 18 shillings and fourpence, and the old fisherman bowing to her on the doorstep with his bald patch shining, and Roderick Kilbrace's white teeth, and the exact moment she had seen the Duke's hand close over the coins he had tried to give her back. She thought about the little slow moment in the physic garden when he had repeated the plant names after her, quietly, one by one. She thought about what it meant that he had come to say all this to her not in a drawing room, but in her aunt's parlor, with a piece of red thread embroidery about soft answers hanging over his head. "Your Grace, Miss Ashcombe, I have one condition. Name it. Do not pay for anything of mine again. Not directly, not through a clerk, not through a benefactor, not through an errand. Not the ring. Not the boot. Not a coat for the winter, not a shilling into any collection you know I have benefited from. If you wish to walk down Wetherby Lane, you may walk down it. If you wish to sit in this parlor, you may sit in it, so long as my aunt allows. But my life pays its own way. It always has. I am not a debt to be settled, not to Roderick Kilbrace, and not to you. If you agree to that, we begin. If you do not, we do not." He did not hesitate. She had thought he might. He did not. "I agree. Without negotiation. Without negotiation." Master Nye's mooring was the exception, not the rule. The exception, not the rule. "Then, Your Grace, you may walk down Wetherby Lane whenever the weather permits. My aunt will offer you tea. It will be weak. She will not apologize for it. Neither will I." He smiled. It was the second time she had seen him smile properly, and she noticed it more this time because she was closer, and because the peat firelight was on his face, and because he had smiled like a man who had not expected to be given anything today and had been given something anyway. Miss Ashcombe. Your Grace. Thank you. Aunt Della appeared in the doorway with a tray. The tea was, as promised, weak. There were 3 cups. She had brought a third for herself, and she set it down between them with the flat, wordless authority of a woman who did not intend to leave the room for the rest of the evening, and did not intend to be asked to. The Duke of Selwick took his tea with 2 hands, the way a much younger man might have, and he drank it without complaint, though it was very weak indeed, and he stayed exactly 40 minutes and no longer, and he rose and bowed to Aunt Della and touched Petra's hand for a fraction of a second in taking his leave, no more than a brush of 2 knuckles, and he went out into the November night. Petra shut the door behind him. She leaned her back against it, the way she had a fortnight ago. Aunt Della, gathering the cups, said, "The tea was very weak. I know. I did that on purpose. I know. He did not complain. I know." Aunt Della paused at the kitchen door with the tray in her hands and looked back at her niece. The peat fire made a small sound in the grate. Outside a gull cried once, sleepy and far off, and was answered by another. The salt smell had come in with the wind again. "Well, child," Aunt Della said, "that is a beginning." "Yes," said Petra, "that is a beginning." 6 months later, on a bright green afternoon in May, she walked down to the harbour to see Master Nye. She was not on an errand. She only wanted to see him. The Merry Wren had been fresh painted at Easter in a pale sea green with a black waterline, and she sat at her mooring as neat as a churchgoer's Sunday collar, and Master Nye, 71 now and no younger, was aboard her mending a net. He looked up when Petra's shadow fell on his hands. "Miss Ashcombe. Master Nye." He was smiling. His mouth had grown into the smile since November. It sat easier there now. "Have you come to tell me a thing, miss?" "I have come to tell you a thing, Master Nye. I hoped you might." "Will it be a happy thing, miss?" She looked out across the harbour. The tide was on the turn. 2 smacks were coming in with the wind at their backs and their sails bright against the pale water. The sun was on everything, and the smell of salt and tar and clean drying rope filled the whole quay. "It will be a happy thing, Master Nye. In the autumn." He nodded slowly, and his old eyes were bright, and he did not say anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying between them. She stayed with him a little while, watching him work the netting needle with his knotted brown fingers. A gull settled on the far bollard and watched them both with a stern yellow eye. Somewhere along the quay a boy was singing without knowing he was singing, in that half-tuneless way of boys with nothing to do. She thought about her mother's ring, which was back on her 3rd finger now. Redeemed 6 weeks before out of the wages of her own new work as the mistress of a very great house. Work she had insisted on being paid for. Work Alastair had insisted on paying her for. Both of them keeping the condition without either of them ever calling it that. She thought about the small clean sound her boots had made on wet stones one Wednesday in November. She thought about how 18 shillings and 4pence had turned out to be, in the end, exactly enough. Not for a coat, and not for a pair of boots, and not for a ring, but for the one thing it had actually been spent on, which was the plain refusal to walk past a wrong. Master Nee set his needle aside and looked up at her, and the sun was on his face, and on the mended net in his lap, and on the small green boat that was still his own. "Miss Petra," he said, "you did a thing." She looked out across the harbour. The tide was turning. The smacks were coming in. The gulls were calling, and the wind off the water was soft with May, and she stood a long moment before she answered him. "We all did, Master Nye," she said. "We all did a thing." And she went home along the quay in the low golden light, with the mended net still lying warm in the old man's lap behind her, and the small green boat rocking gently at her tether, and the harbor going about the ordinary business of the sea as though nothing in the world had ever needed saving. Because in the ordinary way of ordinary places, once a thing has been saved, it is only ordinary again, which is, in its own quiet way, the whole point of saving it.